Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
You should celebrate yourself every day. But some days you should celebrate with jewelry. Whether you want to commemorate an unforgettable moment or just bring some added sparkle to your collection, Blue Nile can offer you expert guidance and a wide assortment of jewelry of the highest quality at the best price. Go to BlueNile.com today and experience the ease and convenience of shopping Blue Nile, the original online jeweler since 1999. That's BlueNile.com. BlueNile.com.
Super real.
Hey, I'm Julian Morgans, and you're listening to What It Was Like, the show that asks people who have lived through big, dramatic events what it was like. So it's summer here in Australia, and that means that everyone around me seems to be really into tennis. I live in Melbourne, where the Australian Open gets held every year, and I'm not really a tennis guy. I don't know anything about tennis. But a friend of mine, he does, and he recently sent me this video. It's a video of the lowest ranked tennis player in the world to have ever won a Grand Slam tournament. And this was an Australian guy back in 1976, and his name is Mark Edmondson. And at the age of 21, he won the Australian Open when he was ranked 212th in the world. And yet, somehow, from this low base, he managed to beat all of the world's best players, and he took home the trophy. And I just love an underdog story. I'm an absolute sucker for them. It's probably because I think of myself as kind of an underdog. And I just love other underdogs. You know, Seabiscuit is one of my favorite movies. Stephen Bradbury, he's one of my favorite people. I just love the idea that, you know, despite all of the rules and the hierarchies and the ceilings in the world, that truly anything is possible. The little guy can win. I love this idea. I'm addicted to this notion. So when I saw this video, I got excited. I thanked my friend, thank you Ben Reeves, and then I set about trying to find Mark. And I found him. He lives north of Sydney, and he agreed to tell me just how he managed to win the 1976 Australian Open, and how it felt to be this kid beating out all of these rich, famous players who hung around with celebrities and had actual sponsorship deals. So let's find out what that feels like. Here is Mark Edmondson. Hey Mark, welcome to the show.
G'day.
How you doing today?
Not too bad, Julian.
That's good to hear. Tell me about where you grew up.
I was born and bred in Gosford, Central Coast, New South Wales, about 85 k's north of Sydney. Mum and Dad played tennis, and my big sister played tennis, so on Saturdays you'd just be hanging around the tennis courts. I was pestering Dad to give me a hit at, you know, when they have afternoon tea, all that sort of stuff. And then I remember when I was about 7, I used to get dressed up in my tennis gear as if I was going to play and go to the tennis courts hoping someone got sick and they'd need a reserve. And that happened a couple of times a year.
So that's how Mark got into tennis, just by growing up around the tennis club with his parents. But then he got a lucky break, because at the age of 10, a professional coach by the name of Charlie Hollis moved to town. And to be clear, I've never heard of Charlie Hollis, but apparently he coached Rod Laver. And I know that name because there's a big stadium here in Melbourne with Rod Laver written on it. So I guess Rod's coach, Charlie, was a big deal. And this guy, Charlie, he started coaching Mark.
He had group sort of lessons on a Saturday morning, so we'd be there at 7 o'clock, waking him up out of the caravan so he could come out and give us lessons. And I finished school I did HSC in 72. And at the end of 71, my parents said I could go away in 73, have sort of, they didn't call it a gap year in those days, but that's probably what it was. It was just a thing of, it'd be fantastic to go and be able to travel the world and play tennis. And if you actually made some money, that'd even be better.
And so that's what Mark decided to do. He took off with a bag full of wooden 1970s tennis rackets, and he travelled the world playing tournaments. It wasn't fancy, but tennis, it gave him a plane ticket out of Gosford.
All my mates at school at HSC, they all went on to be doctors and scientists and geologists and and here I am bumming around the world with the arse out of your pants. 4 of us bought a Austin 1800, and we travelled around Europe in that with our suitcase, like the Griswolds, with the suitcases all on the top, because we didn't want our rackets to get wet, so they were in the boot.
Okay.
But our suitcases would get wet on top of the roof. And sometimes sleeping in the car because you couldn't afford accommodation. You'd write letters to these tournaments to say, you're the such and such ranked junior in Australia, and they might write back and say, yes, we'd love you to play the tournament. We'll give you accommodation for a week. So we'd go there because we didn't have to pay for a hotel. We get to sleep in a bed.
And this is how Mark got good. For half of every year, for the next 3 years, he took off overseas to play tennis and to live on the road. If you've seen the movie Challenges from last year, and the actor, Josh O'Connor, that guy who's sleeping out of his car, playing tournaments, that's exactly what Mark was doing. Except in this case, it was the 1970s, and Mark had sideburns and a mo. And then he'd come back home to Gosford, and he'd work some crappy jobs to earn enough money just to leave again.
I had a friend, and his family owned a big hardware store, like a Mitre 10 Bunnings thing before it became that big. And he just put me on staff out the back, carry those bricks to the lady's car or whatever they asked me to do. So I did that for a few weeks in between tournaments. The more you could play a tournament, the better. So I just did whatever. Another friend, my godparents' best friends owned a nursery. So I worked with them for a few weeks here and there, get planting azaleas or something. So you just did whatever you could to pick up some dollars and try and keep it so you could go away the next year.
And then he'd go back to Europe and he'd get back on the circuit. And each time that he returned to Australia, people around him, they could see that he was getting better.
The third year, at 75, I started winning some matches and doing okay. Suddenly I figured out how to win and played some more tournaments. And prior to the Australian Open, got asked, would I like to go to the Tasmanian Open? Then off I went and managed to win the Tasmanian Open. So I was starting to win tournaments. That's a month before the Aussie Open.
Let's pause here for a sec, because I want to ask you something about. So you were ranked when you got to the Australian Open. You were ranked 212th in the world. What does that mean? What can you describe your playing style at that time? Me as a novice, if I'd come and seen you in 1976, what would I have seen in your playing?
It was a serve volleyer, strong, probably looked more like a football player than a tennis player. The ranking doesn't identify how you play. The ranking identifies whether you've been able to accumulate points that allow you, the more points you get, the more tournaments you get in. So those points, I was just accumulating them. I'd only accumulated 11, and 11 points got me to be ranked 212. Now I think 11 points probably gets you to be 9,000 or something.
So in some ways your ranking was a sort of quirk of mathematics.
Yes.
It didn't really... So when I see a number like that, I'm like, he just means objectively he's the 212th best player in the world. There's 212 better players above you.
Theoretically that was the case, except there was probably another 100 that didn't have any points that were equally as good as me.
So that's the ranking system. But back to the story. Mark's just managed to win the Tasmanian Open. And he goes home to start doing a temp job, cleaning at a local hospital, when one day he gets a call from Tennis Australia. And through this sort of complicated ranking system and a few other factors that I won't go into here, they're inviting him to play at the Australian Open. And of course, Mark says yes. Were you nervous?
you're nearly always nervous. Doesn't matter what match you're at. Every player I played, Phil Dent, Brian Fairley, Dick Creeley, Rosewell, Newcomb, were all great worldwide players and ranked in the 30s or in the top 10 in the world. So I had nothing to lose and everything to gain. And these guys didn't really know how I played. They knew my name, might have seen me playing in the juniors and this sort of stuff. And it just so happened that because I was Neville Nobody, we weren't put on the main courts. So these guys who are quite good players are suddenly playing out on the rubbish courts out the back, which I'm used to with bad bounces and, they're not as pristine as the centre court. And they weren't necessarily happy being out there. And both Dent and Fairley were, I didn't realise at the time, but were renowned for often having an injury. And even if they didn't have an injury, they thought they had an injury. They were just those types of guys. And
they sound annoying.
Yeah, great players, but there's always something wrong.
Yeah.
And I think I got them on the days when something might have been wrong and they weren't as keen. And here I am serving best I've served in my life at that stage, serving aces, whacking balls, hitting really good stuff. And I'm trying my hardest, and they might have just travelled from overseas, and a bit jet lagged or anything. So I got through those, and then I got to play on the centre court. But it's a totally different feeling. You've got a surrounding building, or not of a roof, but enclosure with people, a lot more people watching, cheering, not too many booing back in those days. And I had to play Dick Creeley, who was, top 25, big 6 foot, sort of 3, 4, big serve, big foot, big game. Everything was big.
Just a big man.
And I managed to beat him like 7-5, 7-6, 7-6, 7-5, something like that. Real close 3 sets. And then I'm in the semis to play Rosewell. And Rosewell was one of my idols. So I just thought, I've already been nervous every other match. I'm even 10 times more nervous playing Muscles. I didn't really think that I could win. I mean, you always think you can win, but realistically, as good as I play, he'll still probably beat me. However, once I was on the court and the conditions were really hot, it was 45 degrees. I didn't really notice it was that hot. I wore a navy blue shirt. I played Rosewell a way that, they'd never seen me play, so they didn't know what I was going to do. And I'd seen them hundreds of times.
Okay.
So I thought, well, no one beats him that way. I'll try the other way. And it seemed to work. Mind you, I played Ken about a month later and I tried the same tactics and he just chopped me to pieces.
He wisened up.
He'd wisened up. Wise old man. So once I beat him, now I'm in the final. That's incredible.
Mark walked off that court having just beaten his hero, who at that time was ranked globally number 2. And now he was just one last match away from winning the Australian Open. And I asked Mark how this felt, and he said that it was amazing. But then he went to the locker room and he overheard his next rival, who was a tennis legend. He was a former world number 1 player named John Newcomb. And he was giving a press interview when he mentioned Mark's performance.
And Nuke was interviewed by the press about playing this young bloke. And he went, he's the one that's going to be nervous. He only beat Rosewell today. He's got to play John Newcomb tomorrow. And I thought, that's a bit harsh. So it was always going to be a very tough match because he had one of the best serve and volley games in the world.
Wait, how did you feel? Let's just take a moment there. Like you get into the final, right? You described yourself as a Neville nobody, and you're suddenly in the final. Like, give me that feeling. What's that like?
Well, it's hard to... No, I'd been in other finals. They just weren't quite as important. So your inner confidence or your self-confidence, not your outward confidence, has been growing for months because I've won so many matches. So you're confident within the ability of what you can do. So if you put it all on the line and the other guy beats you, well, it's the best you can do.
It wasn't just Newcomb's serve and volley that was the issue, though. These two men were from totally different worlds. As a quick example, 3 months before this final, Newcomb had actually been in the car driving with a young George W. Bush when Bush was arrested for drink driving. Remember that case? It was kind of a big deal about 20 years ago. Well, John Newcomb, he was there in the car. He was actually 10 years older than Mark, and he rubbed shoulders with the rich and famous. He was a big deal. But despite this, despite all of the stuff stacked against him, things seemed to go Mark's way. I'll set the scene, just based on the video that I've seen on YouTube. Okay, so the final, it's held on a really hot day. Imagine a bright Australian summer day, and there's almost no shadows. Like, it looks like the match was held just after noon. And Mark and John, they're playing on this grass court that to me looks really hard and a bit thirsty. And all around them are billboards for Gillette and Marlboro cigarettes. You know, this is the 1970s. And Mark is wearing a yellow polo, and John, he's dressed all in white. And then they start playing. And even to my completely ignorant eyes, Mark looks like he's playing pretty well.
The courts in Australia suit me better than overseas grass because the ball bounced a bit higher. So my second serve was a bit better. My first serve zipped a bit more. So Nuke and I were nip and tuck. I think he won the first set in the tiebreaker and I won the next sets. But at a set all and 1-2 or 2-3 and 15-30, the referee called the match off because it got a bit windy. On my serve. I'm 15-30 down, serving into the bad end. And it went from 42 degrees to 22 degrees in 20 minutes. A change, Big Southerly came through. So then it went from, a battle to a real battle because you're struggling to play properly in that sort of wind. I mean, we're talking 20, 30K winds. And he had a good serve volley. A good service action with a ball toss that didn't get flustered too much by the wind. You watch a number of the current players like Zverev and Medvedev and these guys. They've grown up playing indoors, so you can toss the ball wherever you like. As soon as they get some sort of wind, their ball moves a metre up so high it blows away. And a lot of the European female players, that's why they struggle outdoors to Kournikova and these people. And then it just became a real battle in the wind. And I think I might have just coped with it more than Nuke. I mean, I don't know. I've never asked him, did he get frustrated that I kept hitting good shots and, I got a break and then I got a second break and then it's all over. I kept going and he couldn't get back in the fourth set.
Hey, so we're just going to stop here for a quick ad break, but stick around because we'll be right back with more What It Was Like.
At 1-800-Flowers.com, we know that connections are at the heart of being human. Whether celebrating life's joys or comforting during tough times, 1-800-Flowers helps you express what words can't. For nearly 50 years, millions have trusted 1-800-Flowers to deliver thoughtful gifts that help create lasting bonds. Because it's more than just a gift. It's your way of showing you care. Visit 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST and connect today. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot. We charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
There's one thing that will forever change the way you sleep, and it's the softest 100% organic cotton bedding from Boll & Branch. You'll fall asleep faster wrapped in the most luxurious comfort. You'll never sleep hot again with airy blankets, cloud-like duvets, and breathable sheets. You'll experience pure comfort on night one and feel your bedding get softer with every wash. Discover the difference with 15% off your first order at bollandbranch.com with code BUTTERY. Exclusions apply. See site for details.
Did you see a moment where his face fell? You know, could you read his body language that he was getting frustrated in the wind?
He was, I've got a moustache that makes me look like I'm unhappy all the time. He's got a moustache that when he shows his teeth, he looks like he's the Cheshire Cat. So he often was showing that grin, even though inside he wasn't grinning. I think he had a set point in the third set tiebreaker from the good end, the down the wind end, and I managed to get a ball over to his backhand volley, which wasn't as good as his forehand volley. And I think the wind blew it a bit, and he was a bit tentative, and the wind just carried it over the baseline to make it 6-all, and he went round into the wind and served a double. And that enabled me to win the next point and go 2-1 up. And I think those couple of points probably dropped him, you know.
Talk me through those last couple of minutes, you know. Were you sort of overcome with the sort of adrenaline? You know, I imagine it was pretty intense.
Oh, well, there was a lot of adrenaline the whole time, but yes, you're 5-1 up serving, and it's really hard to play. You know, normally you'd think, well, I'll just go whack, whack, whack and should get this over, but he wasn't going to be giving in. And I remember the final point. I got to 40-15, I think it was, and I think I missed my serve and hit a good serve into his backhand. I think it was his backhand, and he hit it and it went up in the air like a lob. And but the wind was pushing it back, and I thought, oh no, it's going to just come over the net. And when it comes up, it'll blow back on his side of the net. You're not allowed to go over there. And I kept running in with my racket because if it hit my side of the court, I was just going to go whack. And when it bounced, or I have played matches where it hits the net and drops down. But it actually just didn't make the net by about 6 inches, landed on his side. So then I've won. So that was... whatever adrenaline you had then comes out like having a cold shower. It just all oozes out of you.
That moment where the ball dropped on the inside of his court and you knew that you'd won, what was that moment like?
Excitement, relief that it's over, relief that you have won and you're hoping to win. You got in this position to win. Disbelief, probably, you know, not really, you know. I've played a number of matches in my career that were, we call them like you're in the zone, as if like they're out of body experiences. You're hitting balls where you think you'd hit it, not where your mind thought you'd hit it. It's very hard to explain. But when I see some of the photos, that's what my eyes are like. Sometimes when you see the ball comes and you've hit it and it goes somewhere and you went, oh, I'm glad I hit it there. It's an inner reaction of how you do play the game rather than you think about it as the ball comes and you think, well, where am I going to hit this? Somehow your brain has predetermined where you're going to hit it, wherever it comes to. So those sorts of feelings, that was in some of the game. So I don't think I could have explained it then, and I can't explain it now exactly the feelings of emotion and adrenaline that just flow after you've won something like that.
Was that moment the greatest moment of your life?
I don't know about the greatest moment of my life. I thought this beating Roseville was the greatest moment of my life at that stage. And to me at that stage, it felt more important than winning the tournament. However, that's to other people, that sounds ludicrous. You know, winning the tournament must be more important and beating Newcomb must be more important. But because I held Roseville in such high esteem, that overrode what the next day was.
So these are big moments, but I'm wondering how they compare to civilian life moments, the birth of a child, marriage, these sort of big life moments. Different feelings, or just do you sort of rank them equally and this is better?
Well, the others might be better. I mean, the birth of your first child's pretty good. The birth of your second child's fantastic. Getting married was fantastic. Just being able to have tennis as my life for 10 to 15 years, travelling as my life, was fantastic. One's a competitive thing and one's a life thing.
Yeah.
And realistically, the life things are more important.
And that's how Mark won the 1976 Australian Open. But my favourite moment was still yet to come, because they got Mark up on this podium and, there's all this ceremony and there's a bit of pomp, and they hand him this enormous trophy, which turned out that it wasn't all connected together. And Mark, he almost drops it. It's this beautiful underdog moment.
So I still had my rackets under my arm and my towel. You'd sort of freshened up and put your jacket on. I'm standing there with my rackets and they give me the trophy. Well, that's great, right? Fantastic. They didn't say, by the way, it just balances on the bit of wood. I just presumed it was connected. And when I just leant and this toppled over, so then I tried to grab it and you don't get it.
Was that embarrassing?
Very much so.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of, for me, it's kind of perfect. You're the ultimate underdog who comes in, wins this Grand Slam, and then you sort of fumble with the trophy. Like, it's sort of this poetic moment.
That's right.
Yeah. So you currently, to this day, you hold the record for being the lowest ranked player to win a Grand Slam. And I think you've taken this place in sort of Australian history as like the ultimate underdog. And I want to know, do you think of yourself in that way? Are you proud of this, or do you not think of yourself like an underdog?
No, I was definitely the underdog. I was the underdog. Okay. I was the lowest ranked person in every match I played, just because I was on the way up. And within 6 months, I might have had a ranking of 100. We don't know. But I was the underdog in every match. And then when it got to the semis and the finals, I was more of an underdog because the two big dogs I was playing were such big dogs. I was a real little dog.
You're a little dog.
They were legends. Roseville had been a legend for 25 years. Nuke had only been a legend for 15 years. Junior Wimbledon winner, 3 times Wimbledon winner. Roseville, with all the majors he won, with a 10-year, he missed 40 majors, and he still won nearly more than everybody else. I mean, it brought me into a limelight that I was unaccustomed to and didn't have any, there was no rule book, no one came along and discussed how to deal with people like you or other journalists. I got bagged after the Australian Open because the press would come along and say, you served really good today. What do you think? I said, yes. They'd ask a question, I'd give a one-word answer because that's all it deserved. I didn't realise they want me to talk for 10 minutes about how I served. Right. But they asked a question, did you think you served good today? Yes.
You needed some media training.
Yeah, but there wasn't such a thing. No one came up and tapped you on the shoulder, and I'd never been interviewed before. Yeah. That tournament. And they didn't interview us for the first, I think they only interviewed us. I'm not even sure I got interviewed before the quarterfinals because we're the guys out the back on the back courts.
When you watch the Australian Open these days and you're seeing, the lowest ranked players at the Australian Open are undoubtedly staying in fairly nice hotels, Do they kind of look like they're doing it a little easy to you?
Well, you could say so. Part of the deal now is you get on a normal 1 week tournament, you get 7 days accommodation in a 4-star or better hotel. That's given to you. That's part of the thing, and everybody's happy now. They're all making plenty of money.
Yeah, far more money.
But it is what it is. We, as much as the money is enormous compared to what we had, because the Australian Open only had $60,000 for total prize money the year I won.
Jeez.
We weren't unhappy. It was still a great life, travelling when it was safe, seeing all the sights of the world, going to lots of different countries. Some you mightn't like, some you think are fantastic,
So I got to ask, did you get the house with the tennis court that you'd always dreamed of?
Yes. We built a house. We bought a block of land that on the northern beaches that could see the ocean. Couldn't.
Nice.
Fair way away. And we built a house and then we eventually put a pool in and eventually put a court in. But we and then I did some coaching. I coached for a few years, but I realised that was going to hammer me physically. The sun and the body would.
Yeah. Very last question. Do you have any advice for other underdogs out there in any career, business, sport? Just some advice on, if you see yourself as an underdog, how can you win?
Well, are you an underdog because you're no good, or you're an underdog because the other dogs allegedly have more experience or position? Many of the underdogs can, given the opportunity, and to be a top sportsman, and a tennis player is maybe one of the worst or best, it's a giant jigsaw puzzle. You've got to be perfectly athletic. You've got to have, in tennis, perfect hand-eye coordination skills. You've got to be able to be fit. You've got to be able to be strong. You've got to have perfect vision. You've got to not have injuries. And then you have to have a brain that can use all those things and not lose the plot. You've got a range of shots in your bag, and the art of picking out the right shot to play. I've said this a lot, I relate tennis to, if you play golf, you're allowed 14 clubs in your bag. Now, most players can only use 4 in tennis. They've got a serve, a forehand, a backhand, a volley, that's about it. So certain players, when the ball comes, they just take the racket back and they hit it. There's no choice. But someone like Kim Warwick or Henri Leconte, these guys, they go, which club will I pick? Because they're so talented they could use 5 of them when the ball comes over here. And they invariably didn't pick the right one. They did. And on their perfect days, they picked all the right ones and they were nearly unbeatable. But the best guy was McEnroe. He'd stand there. You could nearly see him. He seems to be seeing it 10 minutes before everyone else, not 10 seconds. Oh, I wonder which club I'll pick out this time. And Federer is the same. McEnroe and Federer invariably picked the right club for that shot and hit it. It was never the wrong club. They always were picking. So, but not everyone has the ability to use all those clubs, let alone pick the right one. And it's very easy to pick the wrong one. It's not always right to pick the good ones.
And the secret, you think the secret to success is knowing which club to play at which time?
Well, but you've got to have the ability to do that. You still can be a great player without it, but it's hard to beat the really, really good players because they've got more clubs than you. They've got more shots than you, and they use them at the right time more often than you because you're just Mr. Steady.
This feels like a good metaphor for success in life to me, not just tennis.
Well, I'm old now. I might have some wisdom.
Well, Mark, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. This has been an exhilarating and wise conversation. So thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Julian.
If you, like me, believe in supporting underdogs, then we'd love your support. Please like and subscribe to the show. And if you're on Apple and you're feeling particularly generous, why not leave us a glowing review? I read them all. I really do. So leave us a message in the form of a review. Today's episode was produced by Rachel Tuffery. It was mixed by Jimmy Saunders, who also did our theme music. Daniela Cantu and Chloe Stelling are our interns. Our cover art is by Naomi Lee Beveridge. And this whole thing has been a Super Real production.
There's one thing that will forever change the way you sleep, and it's the softest 100% organic cotton sheets from Boll & Branch. You'll fall asleep faster wrapped in the most luxurious comfort. You'll never sleep hot again with sheets that feel breathable to sleep in. You'll experience the purest softness on night one and feel your sheets get even softer with every wash. Discover the difference with 15% off your first set of sheets at bollandbranch.com with code BUTTERY. Exclusions apply. See site for details.